Thank you so much for joining me for our pattern room work today. Today, we're covering the 60-second method to stop fearing what your toxic boss will do next. And as I'm reading that title, I bet you're sort of thinking the 60 seconds method, is it possible to actually have a 60-second method to do this? But more so, what might surprise you is that there's actually a type of toxic boss that is worse than a toxic boss. And this is important because it's often the very thing that often creates the fear and the uncertainty in a work situation. So today I'm going to be revealing this version of a toxic boss to you. And then I'm going to be showing you how you can take your inner life back from that person so that they can stop controlling things for you. So what we're going to be covering today is for you if you have people above you in your work who are unpredictable. People in your environment at work that put you in a situation where you're constantly working on eggshells and leave you feeling uncertain, especially if you have a manager whose behavior and unpredictability just keeps breaking you. This is what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to give you a specific strategy that's going to help you get a peace of mind. And it's the kind of peace of mind that, regardless of the fact that the person has not changed, once you are able to master this strategy, you will find yourself just feeling at peace. Even though, yes, they're still doing things that are irritating, they're still doing things that are frustrating, they're still doing things that might give you a little bit of worry and bother, but we're going to take the stress, the pressure, the negative impact that they place on you. We're going to take it down from a 10 down to almost a 0 if possible, even though the toxicity is still going on. So just for those who might be joining or watching this later and who may not know who I am, my name is Adewale Ademiwa. I'm a licensed consultant psychotherapist and AI strategist. So I'm the founder of stresstherapist.net, and I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years, treating high-functioning depression, trauma, personality difficulties, and all forms of anxiety. I've helped over 1,600 people to break out of this survival mode using my 4 forces framework so that they can stop sacrificing themselves just so that they can keep functioning. If you've been with us so far, you know I've been running the free negative pattern breaking seminars for people who are perhaps exhausted from just holding things together. Now, my current passion is to help create a world where everyone has personalized emotional support in their pocket using my knowledge of AI and psychotherapy. So just kind of watch this space. One of these days, you will have a psychotherapist in your pocket. That's my utmost goal at the moment. Right, so moving on. There's a big question here is that, are you on the leash? And when I say, are you on the leash, this is the leash that the toxic manager will place you on. And you won't even realize you are being placed on the leash. And when you think about a leash, you think about a leash that we use to sort of pull a dog, to kind of keep a dog in check. So the question here is, for the toxic managers you might be experiencing, have you been placed on a leash without you knowing? Perhaps you've been blaming the wrong thing, because the common experience is that if you have a toxic manager that is causing problems for you, chances are that you will want to conclude that they are the problem. But I want to sort of highlight today that perhaps maybe not necessarily that they are the problem. Yes, they are a problem, but there's a bigger problem that's connected to this. And this is about the leash again, the leash in action. How does this leash work? Have you ever noticed that if you have someone who's toxic and they are toxic consistently, they are less of a problem than someone who is sometimes toxic, sometimes kind, sometimes toxic, and you cannot predict when the toxicity and the kindness will come. So just to check with you, do you get the gist of what I'm saying there? Because this is the big picture here. Because you might even find this in some Christian organizations where there's someone who is very kind, or they seem to be very kind. Now, because they're very kind, their toxicity becomes very unpredictable and becomes harder to manage. And this is a person who's actually more dangerous than just a toxic manager. Because a toxic manager who's constantly toxic, you can expect that that's what you're going to get. But the one that is cold, hot and cold, that's the one that becomes very heartbreaking. Abigail, I saw you wanted to say something earlier.
No, I was going to say, at least when they're continuously toxic, it's like your enemy, isn't it?
Exactly.
The one that's smiling with you, you don't really know when they're going to turn on you. So I rather the
Exactly.
toxic one that's continuously toxic because I know where I stand with you.
Exactly. And the problem is when someone is coming to you and they're smiling at you, they're treating you nicely, and then you hear somebody along the line that they've said something bad about you that is now having an impact on your performance or the expectation other people are having on about you. So this kind of manager becomes the problem that create a huge sense of uncertainty. And this is why this is even more important. It's because the way our brain works, you see, our brain is a prediction machine. Because the way the brain works is that it always runs a forecast of what is going to happen. So you leave to go to your work in the morning. Let's say you take a train to work. You sort of expect what should happen. That is that you would get to the train station, the train will come at a particular time, especially if you are in a town where things are done very much on time. Um, so your brain would make those predictions, and because your brain knows what to expect, perhaps don't feel as anxious. But if you have a train station that is never on time, always hard to predict, and you have to get to a particular interview at a specific time, you're going to be full of a lot of anxiety because you can't predict the situation. And because you see, the brain is a predicting machine, it sort of has to forecast and check against what's real, what's happening. And the whole job here is to kind of shrink the gap between what you're forecasting and what's really happening. So the brain needs to do this. Now, why is this important? And the reason this is important is often the reason why you develop a lot of anxiety when you're dealing with the unpredictable manager that I've described, the one that is hot and cold, kind, not kind, is that they create anxiety. And to understand anxiety, you can think of anxiety very different from fear. So fear, you can almost say fear, it has an object. So there's something that you can see that you're fearing. But anxiety, what tends to happen with anxiety is you're pushed in a situation where you cannot really predict properly what the threat is, how the threat will affect you, how vulnerable you are in the situation, what steps to take to protect yourself. That kind of a scenario produces naturally anxiety that then becomes hard to overcome. And this is the thing that the toxic boss is really, really sort of banking on. This is the leash that they're banking on. I'll explain a little bit how it's a leash in a bit. But I want to kind of use another analogy to really elaborate this even further. And that is a toxic boss is almost like a slot machine, especially the ones that he gives you kindness and gives you toxicity the next day, and is unpredictable when you get it. Because what's going to start happening, you know how with a slot machine, what happens is you put your coins in, and you pull the lever, and you may win. So now you win one. You think, okay, now that I've win one, maybe I can now win £10,000. And then you put all the monies you have in it and realize you don't win. But it's because you won sometime. So you won some. That's what made it feel like you're going to win more. And this is the same mechanism a toxic boss is sort of playing on. They give you some good behavior. They give you some kindness. And you suddenly experience, oh, I can actually get this kind of kindness from this person. They can treat me this way. And they put you in a state where you are now chasing that kindness by the things you are doing. And this is where the trick is, because it creates the 5 hidden triggers, this is the leash itself, the leash that they're placing on you. And the triggers, so the triggers are, you spend a lot of energy trying to decode this boss. In other words, you're trying to read his wound. You're trying to read what version you have that day. You're trying to adjust yourself to what you see. Or you find yourself sort of over preparing. Or you find yourself checking with others, or you find yourself replaying it yourself or beating yourself up. Now, if what you're doing is that you're trying to decode him, obviously that's going to fail because it's just impossible to decode. It's too variable, impossible to decode. And because it's impossible to decode, you are constantly left predicting. You see how that is feeding anxiety? Now, if you are spending a lot of time over preparing, and the idea with over preparing is you're thinking that if you work harder, you do better, you produce more good work, they will see the quality you're bringing. But this person, when you spend 10 hours polishing a particular piece of work, then they go and pick up on maybe a sentence that you spelled wrong in an email that has nothing to do with anything. And that's the one that they then really shower a lot of criticism upon you about, right? So over preparing to appease this person is impossible because of what they would do and what they will pick to undermine you. And so you spend a lot of time checking with others. It may be that maybe in the office you are with other people who have been experiencing this person, and you may speak with them and find out, oh, is this what you're going through? Is this what you're going through? Now, sometimes that may be supportive, but the problem with this is quite often this toxic boss now does something like we call triangulation, and they triangulate with members of the team. Before long, anything you said about him or her gets to them because somebody in the team has said something, right? So it actually places you in more difficult situation. Or you find yourself just kind of replaying the situation to yourself because you're trying to clarify for yourself how to fix this problem. What is it that you've done wrong? What is it you're not doing well? Again, it's still putting you in a situation where you can't find a solution. And then the final one, which is beating yourself up, this one is a bit strange in a way it can warp a person's mind. Because you see how emotions work. Whenever we are in an emotional state, the tendency is that we lose a bit of our rational thinking. So, for example, you get angry. You will react in a way that you would do things or say things that you would usually say in your calm, normal state. In fact, you might say things that make you completely ashamed of what you have said. And that's because in an angry state, you're not thinking as clearly. So in the same way, in an anxious state, in a in a stress state, you are not thinking as clearly. Now, if you're already anxious, then you are beating yourself up for feeling anxious or feeling vulnerable around this manager. What's happening is you're doubling up on your emotions, which just makes you even more likely to perform poorly. And all these things, you know what the manager is doing? All these things, they're counting heavily on it, that is going to make you do things that they can pinpoint to show you that you are not good enough. I'm going to stop for a second and just ask, everything I've described so far, has it made sense? Has it felt relatable? Or do you feel like I'm speaking over you?
Maybe I would say for me, some things make sense, others it makes sense because I'm saying part in my experience.
Right.
But what the others, well, the one bit makes sense was my experience. The other bit is I'm saying, oh, okay, so that's what it is. Because the other bit that you're explaining is not about me, it's about the manager,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not able to tell what's going through their minds on that team while they do it. So when one said, yeah, it makes sense because it's my experience.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that say outside. I'm saying, oh, okay. I wasn't aware.
Okay, so just checking, but perhaps were you able to join us at the beginning where I started the explanation about the toxic manager?
No,
Okay.
I'm trained in.
So you came in a bit later. That's fine. So I'll just kind of do a quick recap. So what we were saying is that the toxic manager, there's often a different type of toxic manager that's worse than a toxic manager. And that is the manager who seems sometimes to be kind and okay and treats you okay on one day and then treats you horrible on the other. You got that one?
Started here before that.
You got that one. Okay, so
Yeah, the consistent versus inconsistent. Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so what I'm not saying then is, so if I may ask you, Busani, in terms of my explanation of the toxic manager, what part of it do you feel that you haven't quite gotten?
No, it wasn't a case that I didn't get it, but it was a matter of me saying, oh, okay, so that's what happens in their mind.
Exactly. Oh, good. Cool. Right. Okay. So now we want to now talk about what do we do? We find ourselves in a situation where every single thing that we feel we are doing to cope with this toxic manager is actually being used against us, because this is what's really happening here. Everything you're putting your energy into ends up becoming something that the toxic manager can actually still utilize, because our focus is on trying our best to predict and work with whatever they present. But we're really trying to almost decode them and, in a way, manage them by trying to do better or trying to hopefully fulfill what they want. And the question here is that is there something that they really want? Or is it that even they themselves, they have very many different reasons why they are not so clear-minded themselves? Right. So now what I'm going to say now, so instead of doing all of that and staying on the leash of the toxic manager, I'm going to now introduce the 60-second method that breaks the leash. Now, I had to beg you to bear with me as I announce what this 60-second method is, because initially it may feel this sounds rubbish, but once you understand it, it's going to click. And why am I saying it's going to click? Because usually when I work with clients and they start to work on this 60-second method, they'll go away with it and think, okay, he has said something, he's given me strategy. Let me just trust and try and see what will happen. And then after a few weeks of trying it, they come back and said, you know what, I didn't expect it to work, but it worked. Right? It worked. And often it works in a way where the manager is still very toxic, is still very unpredictable, but the person themselves, they are not finding themselves going up and down in anxiety and fear because of the behavior and the responses of the manager. Okay, just seeing somebody's texting. Okay, so I don't think it's any kept. You keep trying to please them, but no matter how you try, you end up not pleasing them, and that's the very big irony of dealing with a toxic manager, especially this brand of toxic managers. So here's the strategy now. We're going to have to leave trying to predicting them and start to predict ourselves. I'm going to explain what that means, but I'm going to just say it again so that it lands properly. We want to stop trying to predict the manager, but instead we start to predict ourselves. Because you see, the manager is unpredictable, but you can know yourself and start to predict how you are dealing with things. And this is going to make sense in a bit. So stop predicting him, start predicting yourself. Once kind of move away from forecasting that uncontrollable external thing that you cannot control. So this will help us get to a point where he can be as erratic as he wants to be. The manager can be as uncontrollable, as hot and cold as they want to be, but you are steady. You are steady. Just can give an example of another client that I worked with that used the strategy. How she found herself in a situation where whenever they're having meetings, the managers would just keep picking on her and giving her tasks that they know she doesn't know how to do, but because they're in a big forum, they know she's not going to say no to it. They kept on picking on her. And because she was finding this very problematic, she would speak to them after, she would speak to them through the email, she would explain to them that they should not be doing this, but they kept on doing it. Now, unfortunately for her, her effort was being placed in trying to still perform better. And she was putting a lot of energy in performing better and getting confused as to why they're picking her. She fell into this loop where she found out that it seemed like everybody else in the team was not being given these tasks. They just only would give it to her. But this was purely because she was doing exactly what we have described before, these five triggers. She was doing exactly these things. So my work with her was to stop her from doing these things and to implement the strategy we're going to implement now. And then she also found herself being able to feel calmer and able to cope. And actually found her voice in one meeting and challenged them back. She challenged them back. And as soon as she challenged them back, about 3 or 4 of her other colleagues in the meeting joined in challenging the manager as well, which was quite amazing for her. That was sort of a big win for her. So, how do we use this strategy? I'm just saying, did anybody put another question? Stop trying to predict the toxic boss and try to predict yourself. Yes. So, how do we do this and how does it actually work? How does predicting ourselves actually work? So, this strategy requires a lot of practice outside of work first, and then you actually start to now bring it into work. Now, some of you who joined us in the last Sunday session, we learned a lot of strategies for calming our body down. So the first step in this strategy is to reclaim your sense of peace, reclaim your sense of calm. So this can be very tricky, especially if you're in a situation where you didn't expect and they just almost like it sprung on you, something that totally surprised you, and you are not able to kind of prepare yourself. But the trick is not necessarily in trying to prepare yourself for the unexpected, but just trying to master how to calm your own self down. Yeah. So not to calm your whole self down. So one of the things, what I was saying here is, okay, I already predict that when my manager triggers me, my tendency will be to become so emotional that I cannot think clearly. And because I can't think clearly, I'm I have lost my words. I don't know what to say. And then because they are so vocal themselves, they speak over me. They don't even let me say things, and they say things to just make me feel horrible. But this is because my body has totally shut down. So the idea here, first things we practice strategies to help to kind of reclaim our body. A very simple process would be maybe take a deep breath in that moment. Take a deep breath. Press your foot on the ground. All we're just trying to do is to reduce the emotional intensity, because with high emotional intensity, you lose your rationality. We just want to do that first. Now, once we do this, we then come to the second strategy. Again, what I'm saying here is this strategy, we are using it in the situation, but we are practicing it outside the situation until we get so good at doing it to the point that it's second nature to do. That is what makes it work. So you can't just say, you listen to me here today and not practice this strategy at all right through the week and then go and meet the manager and be in a situation where they trigger you and try to use it. It will not work. The only reason why it works is that you have already done the work before, right? So last week's webinar, especially the video that we have done from the webinar as well, if you watch it, we talked about a number of strategies there too that are quite important. In actual fact, we practiced some strategies in the webinar itself, and people found themselves feeling calm. I don't know, Abigail, can you describe your experience of that? Yeah, for the group here.
Most certainly. So what I did basically was I took myself back to like a creek where I'm standing, which brought my heart rate down, and like I said to you, my stomach felt, from reliving the experience, a bit tight with my shoulders. But after taking myself back to creek where, there's nice water flowing, it relaxed my body. Plus, as I always say to people, what works for me as well is I smell my albus oil, and that helps to de-stress. So,
So for each person has to find something that they find soothing, and for Abigail it was the albus, or it was the soothing sound of a creek of water. And then we used this particular strategy last week to work on this, to bring yourself into a calm state. Now, once you're in a calm state, now you have your mental ability back, your ability to think clearly, ability to respond and reply to things. So again, we're saying this is something you practice, first of all, outside the situation. So that's the first step, reclaim. Now, the second step, which is the one that is more about the predicting yourself, yeah? This is the reclassify step. Now, the idea is that we want to give the brain an actual thing that it can focus on with regards to yourself. So this is how this would work. If I know that my manager has maybe 5 different patterns. One pattern is some days they will treat me nicely. That's one pattern. Some days they'll even say nice things to other people in front of me, yeah? But some days, out of the blue, they'll just be mean and horrible. Some days they'll pick something that's completely unconnected to the work we're doing. In other words, they gave me a piece of work to go and do, and they blame me for something else that they didn't give me to do. Okay, so let's say that's 4 things now. Now my job would be, okay, so when he praises me, how do I usually react with this? Perhaps maybe how I react is, and I'll feel so good. I feel so calm and I relax around this person. I I make myself, because I feel okay, we're in good terms now, right? But reality is this is just a fluke. This is just a trap. This is just the state where they are. This is the what do you call it? The what I mentioned earlier, the slot machine. Yes, this is the slot machine that makes you feel good. That's really what that is. So now, in your reclassification, you're now taking that situation. I think, okay, when my manager is kind, I acknowledge it, but I don't really take it as, okay, this person has changed. I know, okay, tomorrow they may be this same thing again. You see, because if I don't do that, this surprises me. When they come and do the bad thing again, it surprises me. It takes me completely out of surprise. But now I classify, okay, they've done something good, but this is how this person is. It's good for now, but it won't be good later on. Or, okay, so maybe the situation where they challenge me about something. So, for example, so there's another client who the manager would often come out of the blue and ask her about something that she has no clue about. And in fact, even if she has some clue about it, it's something that she has to really go and look into some data to be able to give an answer, right? And so whenever the manager comes out of the blue and asks her, and she says, she's a bit dumbfounded, and the manager said, but you should know about this, you should know what this is. You should know what this is, right? So she started learning to say, okay, whenever the manager comes and asks me like this, I'll just say to the manager, okay, oh, right. So okay, I understand what you want. Just give me a second. I'll be back in a minute. Let me just go and clarify from the data so I give you the best answer. Right. And to do this almost like a broken record, I don't know if anybody knows about the broken record strategy, which is when a toxic person comes, they want to shock you, like that manager. They challenge you with something, maybe you don't know it, and you said, oh, okay, just give me a second, let me go and check, and I'll come back with an answer. They would ask you again. They will ask you again. They will ask you again. And the idea would be, instead of becoming flustered or one thinking, okay, maybe I'm not giving the right answer. What's the answer this person wants? No. The idea was that you reply exactly the same way. Replied exactly the same way. You will say, okay, I'm not sure if you understood me. I said I was just going to go and check and come back and give you the right answer. Right. So in that particular situation, maybe that is the way you've chosen to answer. So what we're saying here is, for every single type of scenario that you have experienced with this manager, you classify it with, okay, this is what this person does here. This is how I can reply here. Now, because you're predicting yourself, you have that in mind. This is what you would do in a situation like this. So when those situations now come up, you have your script prepared. You have the situation managed. So this way, when the manager is doing whatever they're doing, all you just do is pull up your own script to manage the situation based on what you have. All right, I'm going to stop for a second here. I'm going to ask questions to see, okay, does this make sense? Feel free to release your mic.
Yeah, it does actually make sense because it's what I understand is being in control of you, because you can't be in control of that person. So therefore, control your mood, control your attitude, whatever it is that they're trying to trigger. You have control over that. Obviously, is I think there is a circle that shows that inside the circle, which will be in representation of inside you, is what you should be able to control. In terms of what's outside that circle, it's not your responsibility to control it. It's that person.
Exactly.
That's why I said, if somebody is misbehaving or doing something that is not a characteristic of yours, don't ever let them project it onto you. Let it be understood. Like I had to say to one colleague one time, I said, when he was finished talking, I said, well, that does not represent me. That's more something that is a representation of yourself that you're portraying. And sometimes just letting them know that you're aware, but in a respectful way, that you're aware of what they're trying to do as well.
Yes. Thank you very much, Abigail. Right, right. So as I'm reading this and I'm explaining this out to you, a common question that people then have is, but what if the situation happens in a setting, in an experience where I wasn't expecting it. I was not expecting it at all. How do I manage that situation? Now, there are two things. One is that your brain is like a muscle. And if you were not to practice everything I'm saying here, if you're not to practice it outside the situation, it's going to be harder to kind of replicate it in the situation. So it's going to be crucial to actually practice. And sometimes I'll actually ask people to role play this in their mind or replay with someone to actually go through the process and pick specific events where the manager has triggered them in a horrible way. So now you're picking those events and you're writing down, okay, this is how I would like to respond. Now, I have to say this very clearly here. Now, this is very different from just thinking about those events and beating yourself up for not acting the way you want to act. Because often what that creates is more stress and anxiety. What we're doing is slightly different in that it's focusing on, okay, this is how this experience went, but this is how I would want to behave if it were to happen again. And so you allow yourself to think about this over and over. Your brain starts to lock it as, okay, this is how I behave under this type of situation. So that then when that situation comes, you do your calming, you reclaiming strategy, you clean yourself, you calm yourself down. Once it's calm, then you use the reclassifying content. In other words, which is the third step, which is the redirect. In other words, you spent all this time classifying the events. When this happens, this is how I would behave when that happens. This is how I would behave. This happened, that happened, this is how I would behave. Predicting your own self so that when the situation now comes, you pull from your list of how you would behave. You have them already prepared and stored. And it's good if they are the same ones that you use so that you're not having to learn too many. So maybe 5 or 6 different types of reactions or responses that you just kind of use over and over. Yeah, so I was saying here, you've pre-committed these protocols. And so you are not being surprised by the experience. Okay, so now another problem that people would then have is that after they've learned this strategy, then one day may happen where they just kind of feel that they relax completely. The manager stunned them and all the strategies just went out of the window. They were not able to use it. And it can almost feel like they've relaxed, they've gone backwards. But what I want to kind of highlight and say, this is very important. If this was to happen, don't think it's a relapse, but just see it as this is just a process in progress that you're going to improve on. So if you think about how change works, change does not work by, I want to learn something that I want to change by, and immediately I've changed. No. The way it works is you practice what you want to change. You find yourself in the situation that you wanted to change, but maybe you didn't change initially. Eventually, after the event, you realize, oh, I wanted to do something different then. But eventually you start to catch yourself in the event. And then eventually start to catch yourself before the event. So you actually expect that this process is going to take place as you are practicing this to sort of manage this manager. So it's important as you're doing this work, there's a particular strand that I'm hoping that you are seeing. And the strand is, one, if I put a lot of energy in trying to predict what this person is going to do next and trying to catch them and change and be better for them, I try to put a lot of energy into doing my better work. If my effort and energy is focused on trying to prevent them having opportunity to criticize me, then I'm on a leash. But if my focus is on, okay, understand that this is this type of person, they go hot and cold, they make us, they make me, they make treat me nicely one day, treat me horribly one day, and I cannot predict it. Once I understand that, all I just do is predict myself, put in my strategies in place, and this starts to make life a lot easier. Now, they may not necessarily change. It's not that they change. It's not that they stop being a pain. They're still a pain. They're still difficult. The only difference is that they're no longer triggering you the way they were triggering you. And what eventually happens is that they get bored of the fact that you are not reacting the way they were hoping you would react. And then they move on to the next person. Unfortunately, I know it's sad to say they move on to the next person, but that's what happens. Right. But that brings us to the end of the strategy. Can I just get your sense of what do you feel is the biggest takeaway that you've taken out for the session today? Please feel free to talk. So if you taken out anything, or if you have any other questions or anything that you feel that you would really like more clarity on.
What I get from it is that I have to understand that I can't control or manage someone else's emotions or the way they behave. But however, I can manage my own by finding ways of controlling how I react to whatever this person's trying to get me to respond to. So if you're trying to get me to be anxious, how to find a way to make myself peaceful or
Yes.
make myself more calm.
Yes.
So they don't get the reaction that they're looking for. Because I think these managers, when they're and bosses, when they're like that, they're aware of what they're doing. Some of them maybe get
Quite often.
lightning out of it, so who knows?
Yes.
That's when the individual who's dealing with such people needs to have that awareness. And like you said, you didn't use that exact words, but you don't let your guard down around them because that's what they want. Especially the unpredictable one. They're nice so that you let your guard down and then you see a change in the person. So your guard's always up, and it's out of the fact that you're aware that they're this type of person. So it's having awareness of yourself, even though you're aware of them, but aware of your own response that you want to have.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you may all have heard of the term love bombing. And they usually use the term love bombing for relationships. But this is really love bombing in action, but in a professional sense, where the person does a lot of things positively towards you, but there is that ulterior motive in trying to sort of get you under their wings, which unfortunately this is the same pattern that then is applied at work. So for those of you who perhaps hasn't been watching or have not been coming to the seminar, the last 2 Sundays, the first Sundays we looked at the map of how this all works, the different places where we need to be very aware of how the system is affecting us and making us vulnerable to the toxic manager. And then last week we did a lot of strategies for the calming of the body. Please, this is very crucial, especially for the reclaiming process. I can tell you, if you can master that, just that alone, you find yourself being able to be at peace and calmness in a situation that would usually get you feeling very hot and anxious and bothered. And when you are in that state where you can be calm and you can collected, that in itself can turn off the manager. Yeah. But then add on top of it what we've learned today, just being able to kind of predict the situation and have your responses and reactions prepared and ready beforehand. This puts you in a more powerful state. Now, next Sunday, we're going to be working on an even more powerful strategy, just to kind of bring everything together and gives you almost like a bulletproof armor against any toxic manager. Now, for those of you who have not joined the pattern room already, my goal is that the pattern room is a place, a community that we've created on WhatsApp. And my goal is for that to be a space where we can talk about the different things and the different experiences that we're going through and support each other. And I would hope to then be putting in a lot of free resources to help you cope in different situations and scenarios. On the screen now, you can see a QR code. You can use your mobile phone if you have a QR code reader to just scan that and use it, give you the link to join the community. If not, if you don't have a QR code reader, just text your email or on a phone number, mobile number to me, and you should have received that number already. Number is 0. I'm just trying to remember my own. Let's give me a second. Yeah, so the number is 07. I had this already. 0737 8942 I just drew a blank there. 0737 8942 So if you are not already in the group, please join the group. Let's just make this something where we all feel strong and supported, because the more we feel like we have people behind us in situations, the more we can get through the difficult experiences we're going through in different situations in life. So I want to thank you for being a wonderful group today. So those who joined a bit later, we're going to have this is recorded, so we'll be sharing the link to the video recording in the group as well. Hopefully by the end of today or latest tomorrow morning. Okay. So thank you so much. And wishing.
Thank you also for sharing your knowledge and your skill with us. And it is very useful and helpful for people like myself, I'd say. I'm speaking from a personal point of view. So thank you very much, Wally, for sharing your time and skills with our knowledge.
You're most welcome, Abigail, and thanks for the support.
No, even here, to be fair, in my case, it's started bad. Eventually, bloody like resigning.
Oh no!
And in my case, what is not a him is a her. It's a
her. It's a she.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is like it's somebody who looks like me, and
oh no! Sometimes that can be worse.
Yeah, in my case, I think it's a bit worse because it's. I said, okay, then what's going on here, kids? Yeah, I don't know whether these lessons are coming, but I'm sure they're always applicable. I'll follow them through. But yeah, I think I'm planning. I need to go to another job offer elsewhere.
Right.
Even accepted, but I think sometimes it was just best to leave things the way they are and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's some situations where it's important to just perhaps move on if that's where it is at. But I guess the difficulty with moving on can often be that wherever you move to, you don't know, you might find a difficult person there as well.
Or it might be that you find a genuinely innocent person, but you always frame them as though you always, always unsure. Like, maybe misreading or misinterpreting
Yes,
their actions. People
exactly.
should be honest.
Exactly. Because if you've been through this with a manager before, the chances are that you can be reading people wrongly as well, definitely. Yeah. So this strategy would also help you be able to sort of differentiate between whether this is just someone who's just innocent or is somebody who's toxic. Because there are telltale signs that you can follow when the person is literally toxic. Yeah.
And thank you very much for help.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Mona, Jewel, and Myrtle for joining.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye, everybody.